Welcome to our deep dive today, all about Leonardo DiCaprio. We're going way beyond the headlines today. Really going to try to explore what makes this guy tick. He's really managed to stay in Hollywood for decades and be successful. He started as a teen heartthrob, and now he's this Oscar-winning actor and environmental activist. It's
Mhm.
pretty impressive. But what is it that really drives him? What are his motivations? What's the story behind the story?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's really what makes DiCaprio so interesting. He's somebody that could just sit back and relax and enjoy his fame and fortune,
Totally.
but he really wants to use his platform to bring attention to issues that he cares about.
Okay, so let's start with his environmental work because that seems to be like a huge driving force for him. I know he's involved with all these different organizations and initiatives, but what makes his approach to this different?
Well, his environmentalism is more than just like donating money
Hmm.
or, going to galas.
Right.
He's really into like the science and policy side of climate change. For example, his foundation has given money to research on renewable energy and sustainable agriculture. And he's been a big advocate for policies like carbon pricing and investing in clean technology.
So he's not just trying to raise awareness. He wants to find like real solutions and change the system.
Exactly. And he's not afraid to challenge powerful interests or speak truth to power. He's been very critical of the fossil fuel industry, and he's called out politicians for not doing anything about climate change.
But he's gotten some criticism about his own lifestyle, like flying private jets and owning a bunch of houses. How does that fit in with his whole environmental message?
Yeah, it's a valid point, and it just shows how hard it is to live sustainably in a world that's not really set up for it.
Right.
DiCaprio has admitted that it's not easy, and he says he's always trying to reduce his own environmental footprint, but he also realizes that individual actions aren't enough. Like, we need big systemic change, and everybody needs to work together.
So he sees his role as more of like a catalyst for bigger change instead of trying to be like a perfect example himself.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. He's using his platform to make the voices of scientists and activists louder and to push for policy changes that will help everyone.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about his acting career because, we all fell in love with him in the movies. Is there something that connects all the films he chooses?
Yeah, well, he seems to be drawn to characters who are complicated and flawed, and they often have a strong sense of purpose.
Okay.
Just think of roles like Howard Hughes in The Aviator, or Frank Abagnale Jr. in Catch Me If You Can,
Yeah.
or Hugh Glass in The Revenant. These characters are always pushing boundaries, challenging norms, and trying to achieve something bigger than themselves.
And he's worked with some of the best directors like Scorsese, Spielberg, and Tarantino. What makes these partnerships so special?
DiCaprio seems to really do well when he's challenged and pushed to his limits creatively. He said that working with Scorsese requires a level of commitment and intensity that brings out his best work. And with Tarantino, they both love cinema history and they like to experiment with different genres.
Okay, so here's something I've always wondered about. We've all heard about the Pussy Posse from the 90s.
Yeah.
Is there more to that story than just what we read in the tabloids?
Well, it's definitely a part of his past, but we have to remember DiCaprio was in his early 20s then.
Yeah.
It was a time of having fun and maybe a little bit of rebellion against how serious Hollywood can be. But as he's gotten older, his priorities have changed.
And there are even stories about him supporting a girl he met at a South African orphanage while filming Blood Diamond.
Yeah, it shows his empathy and that he really wants to help other people.
Right.
He's not just an activist for show. His actions prove it.
It really does seem like there's so much more to DiCaprio than what we see on the surface.
Absolutely. I think that's why he's so captivating. He's constantly changing, challenging himself, and using his position to do good in the world.
So speaking of challenging himself, I read that he almost chose a very different career path.
Oh, you mean his almost career as a marine biologist?
Exactly. It sounds like he was really passionate about the ocean as a kid.
Yeah, he was fascinated by sharks. He even dreamt of becoming a marine biologist.
It's crazy to think about a world where Leonardo DiCaprio studies sharks instead of being a famous actor. What a different life that would be.
But maybe his childhood love for the ocean influenced his environmental activism later on.
That's an interesting connection. His life has been full of twists and turns.
Absolutely. And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll discover even more fascinating things about this incredible star.
I can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and career of Leonardo DiCaprio. In part 1, we talked about his environmental activism, his interesting taste in art and music, his friendship with Kate Winslet, and even his breakdancing skills. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like the more we learn about him, the more we realize how complex he is as a person.
Yeah, and I bet there are still more surprises to uncover. Like, did you know that DiCaprio is a big watch collector?
Yeah, he's known for having a really awesome collection of watches,
Hmm.
including some vintage Rolexes and Patek Philippe's. Some people think that he's so into watches because he appreciates precision and craftsmanship. Could make sense because he's so dedicated to his acting.
Yeah, that's another example of how different interests can come together and show something deeper about a person.
Yeah.
Speaking of character, let's talk about one of his most famous roles, Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, yeah, that performance is amazing.
Yeah,
It shows both his comedic talent and his ability to play characters who are really messed up.
yeah,
It's a wild movie.
yeah, it is. And I heard that he did some pretty intense things to get ready for that role.
Oh, yeah, he spent time with the real Jordan Belfort. Like, he fully immersed himself in that crazy Wall Street world. And he worked with a movement coach to learn all of Belfort's mannerisms and how he moved.
Wow, that's dedication. But wasn't it hard to play a character who is so morally questionable?
Well, DiCaprio has said that he tries to understand every character he plays. He wants to know what motivates them, even if they do bad things.
That's what makes him such a good actor. He can find the good in even the worst characters. Speaking of good, let's talk more about his charity work.
Right.
We talked about it a little bit before, but I want to go deeper.
Yeah, well, DiCaprio's charity work is as diverse as his interests. He supports so many causes, from protecting the environment to helping after disasters to fighting poverty. And he doesn't just write checks. He actually goes to these places. He meets with local leaders. He speaks up for groups that don't have a voice.
So he's not just doing it for show. He's really involved with the causes he cares about.
Definitely. And he's not afraid to use his platform to challenge things. He's spoken at the United Nations. He's met with world leaders. He's even talked to Congress.
Okay, one last fact before we wrap up this part. This one is about something scary that happened to DiCaprio while filming The Revenant.
Oh, are you talking about the bear attack?
Yes, that scene where the bear attacks him was actually really close to being real.
Yeah, the bear in the movie was CGI, but DiCaprio did actually have a close call with a real bear while they were filming. It was pretty tense, but luckily no one got hurt.
Wow. It's crazy to think that even on a movie set, things can go wrong like that.
Yeah.
But it shows how far DiCaprio is willing to go for his art.
Oh, he's definitely not afraid to take risks in his work and in his life.
Okay, so as we finish this part of our deep dive, it's clear that Leonardo DiCaprio is not just a famous actor. He's an artist. He's an activist. He's a complex person with so many different passions.
And he uses his fame to help others, to challenge how we think, and to inspire people to make positive changes.
Exactly, and I think that's why he's such an important figure today. He shows us that being famous and wealthy can be used to do good, and that even one person can make a difference.
He's leaving a mark on the world that goes way beyond movies.
And that, my friend, is the end of part 2 of our deep dive into the amazing life of Leonardo DiCaprio. I hope you've enjoyed it so far and that you're starting to see him in a new light.
Yeah, definitely stick around for part 3, where we'll keep exploring even more fascinating stuff about this incredible guy.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Leonardo DiCaprio. In parts 1 and 2, we talked about his dedication to environmentalism, his interesting taste in art and music, that super close bond he has with Kate Winslet, and even his hidden breakdancing skills. Who knew?
Seriously, it seems like with every new thing we learn about him, we get a better understanding of just how multi-talented he is.
Yeah, totally. And I bet there are still things about him that would surprise us. For example, did you know that DiCaprio is a huge watch enthusiast?
Yeah, he's known for his amazing collection of watches. Like he has vintage Rolexes, Patek Philippe's. You know, some people think that his interest in watches might come from his fascination with precision and craftsmanship, which makes sense because he's so dedicated to his acting.
It's another example of how different interests can actually be connected and tell us something deeper about a person. Speaking of character, let's talk about one of his most famous roles, Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh yeah, that was such a great performance. It showed his comedic timing and his ability to portray characters who are really flawed. That movie was a wild ride, that's for sure.
For sure, and I heard that he did some pretty extreme things to prepare for that role.
Oh yeah, he actually
What?
spent time with the real Jordan Belfort.
Yeah.
Like he totally immersed himself in that crazy Wall Street world.
Yeah.
And he worked with a movement coach to like perfectly mimic Belfort's mannerisms and how he moved.
Wow, talk about commitment. But wasn't it hard to play a character who was so morally ambiguous?
DiCaprio has said that he tries to approach every role with empathy. He tries to understand why the character does what they do, even if their actions are wrong.
That's a really interesting approach. And it's probably what makes him such a compelling actor. He can find the humanity in even the most flawed characters. Speaking of humanity, let's talk more about his philanthropic work. We touched on it briefly before, but I want to dive a little deeper.
For sure. DiCaprio's philanthropy is as diverse as his interests. He's supported so many causes, from environmental conservation to disaster relief to poverty alleviation.
Mm,
And he's not afraid to get involved. He's visited remote communities. He's met with local leaders. He's spoken out on behalf of marginalized groups.
that's awesome. It's so clear that he's not just writing checks, he's genuinely invested in the causes he believes in.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not afraid to use his platform to challenge the way things are. He's spoken at the United Nations. He's met with world leaders. He's even testified before Congress. He's really using his voice to make a difference.
All right, so one last fact before we wrap up our deep dive. This one is about a close call DiCaprio had while filming The Revenant.
Wait, are you talking about that scene with the bear?
Yes, that scene where he gets attacked by the bear was scarily realistic.
Yeah, the bear in the movie was CGI. But DiCaprio actually did have a close encounter with a real bear while they were filming. It was a pretty tense moment. Yeah. But luckily, no one got hurt.
Wow. It's a good reminder that even in a controlled environment like a movie set, things can go wrong. And it speaks to DiCaprio's dedication to his craft, to push himself to the limits for his art.
He's definitely not afraid to take risks, both on screen and off.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Leonardo DiCaprio, it's clear that he's much more than just a Hollywood star. He's an artist, an activist, a philanthropist, and a really complex person with a wide range of passions.
Yeah, I totally agree. And he uses his platform to bring attention to important issues, to challenge the way we think, and to inspire people to make a positive impact on the world.
I think that's what makes him such a fascinating and inspiring figure. He shows us that fame and fortune can be used for good.
Yeah.
And that one person can really make a difference in the world.
And his impact goes way beyond just the movies. It's really cool to see.
That's a great point. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the amazing world of Leonardo DiCaprio. I hope you enjoyed this journey of discovery as much as we did, and maybe you even learned a few things along the way.
And maybe it even sparked some curiosity to learn more about him on your own. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep,